Last summer, I came home to visit my parents and siblings. Usually, my summers were spent working for my university's housing department, juggling long hours and endless complaints from students. The thought of escaping all that for a few months of peace at home had me counting down the days. My parents lived in a quiet, middle class neighborhood. It was the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened. The most dangerous incident I could remember was when a raccoon knocked over our trash cans. No burglaries, no break ins, just dull, predictable suburbia. I found comfort in its uneventfulness, even if I sometimes wished for more excitement. That summer, our air conditioning had broken down. My dad, ever the planner, scheduled a repairman to come by at 2 p.m. He said he'd leave work early to meet him. My mom and sisters had their own schedules to keep, so the house was mine for the day. It felt nice having the place to myself. I spent the morning lazily catching up on shows before deciding to take a nap in my upstairs bedroom. I woke up to the sound of a door slamming. Disoriented, I glanced at my phone. It was 1:30 p.m. Groggily, I figured it was Dad coming home early. Maybe the repairman had arrived sooner than expected. Summers in Texas are brutal, and I was desperate to get the AC back up and running. Sweating through another humid afternoon was not on my list of priorities. As I shuffled out of bed and reached the landing, something felt off. The house was too quiet. Not the usual peaceful quiet, but an unnerving kind of silence that seemed to press down on me. I strained my ears and heard it, the faint creak of hinges, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal clinking. It came from downstairs, Dad's gun cabinet. My dad cherished that cabinet. It was his pride and joy, filled with a carefully curated collection of rifles and shotguns. My first thought was that he was showing it off to the repairman. He loved to chat and share stories, even if it meant sidetracking from the task at hand. Still, the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Then my phone rang. The sharp buzz startled me so much I nearly dropped it. I realized it was charging in the bathroom adjacent to my bedroom, since my room's outlet was broken. I hurried over and picked it up. It was my dad. "Hey, just wanted to let you know the repairman's running late," he said. "He'll be there closer to 3. You're still at home, right?" I froze, my stomach churned, and a cold wave of dread washed over me. Whoever was downstairs wasn't my dad. It wasn't the repairman. My hands trembled as I whispered into the phone, "Dad, someone's here. I think they're in your gun cabinet." His tone shifted instantly. "Get somewhere safe. Lock the door. Call the police." I darted back into the bathroom and locked the door behind me, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. My fingers fumbled as I dialed 911. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline in the chaos. "Officers are on their way," she assured me. "Stay on the line with me. They'll give you a safe word when they arrive to let you know it's them." Time stretched and warped in the small, dark bathroom. Every creak of the house made my breath hitch. I crouched in the corner, clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My mind raced with horrifying possibilities. Who was downstairs? What did they want? Did they know I was here? Then came the knock. It was soft, but deliberate. My heart nearly stopped. "It's the police," a voice said. "The safe word is Blue Jay." Relief surged through me, and I scrambled to unlock the door. As soon as I stepped out, I was met with a flurry of motion. Guns drawn, the officers ushered me away from the bathroom. My legs felt like jelly as they guided me down the hallway. "Wait," I stammered. "What's going on?" They didn't answer. One of them flipped the bathroom light on, illuminating the small space I'd just been hiding in, and then I saw him. A man stood in the bathtub, dressed in black from head to toe. His face was partially obscured by a hood, but his eyes were fixed on me, unblinking and cold. In his hand was a knife, the blade catching the harsh light. I stumbled back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. He had been there the whole time. While I whispered into the phone, while I crouched in terror, he had been mere feet away, silently waiting. My mind reeled, trying to comprehend the sheer horror of it. The officers moved swiftly, shouting commands I couldn't process. The man didn't resist as they disarmed and restrained him. It was almost as if he knew the game was up. Even as they hauled him out, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His silence was more chilling than any threat he could have uttered. Once he was gone, the adrenaline that had kept me upright drained away. I sank to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. One of the officers crouched beside me, speaking in a soothing tone, but his words barely registered. All I could think about was how close I'd been to, what, death? Something worse? The thought made my skin crawl. Later, I learned that the man had broken in through the back door. He'd likely assumed the house was empty, given how quiet it was. Why he lingered upstairs, why he hid in the bathroom instead of fleeing, was a mystery I didn't want to unravel. The police found several items in his possession: rope, duct tape, and other tools that painted a grim picture of his intentions. For weeks, I couldn't sleep without checking every lock in the house multiple times. The sight of the bathroom door made my chest tighten. I couldn't even charge my phone in there anymore without feeling a pang of irrational fear. My safe, boring neighborhood didn't feel so safe anymore. To this day, I don't know what stopped him from attacking me in that bathroom. Maybe he didn't realize I was there until it was too late. Maybe the sound of my phone call scared him into hiding. Or maybe, for reasons I'll never understand, he chose not to. Whatever the answer, I am grateful to still be here to wonder. It started like any other sleepover, the kind where time doesn't really matter and the hours slip by unnoticed. It was a Saturday, and Jordan and I were holed up in his basement, huddled together with bags of chips and soda cans littered across the floor. We had planned this night for weeks, a mix of late night movies and video games. The sort of thing we'd been doing since we were kids. The house was quiet, too quiet for a weekend night, with his parents upstairs asleep. The basement was dim, lit only by the flickering light from his TV, the quiet hum of the air conditioning just a background noise. The faint sound of rain tapping against the window added to the coziness of the night. I remember feeling calm, like the world outside didn't matter. We were safe in the basement, in the warm, familiar darkness. The movie was something we'd seen before, one of those low-budget horror films where everything was predictable. We laughed at the cheesy jump scares, mocking the characters' decisions, and shared stupid theories about the plot. But by the time it was well past midnight, our laughter had started to die down, and the silence between us became heavy. The air felt thicker somehow, almost suffocating. I glanced at the clock, 1:30 a.m. Jordan shifted on the floor, his eyes glazed from exhaustion, but not quite ready to call it a night. I too felt the weight of sleep tugging at my eyelids, but something in the air made me uneasy. It was nothing specific, just a sense that something wasn't right. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "You hear that?" Jordan paused, glancing around the room. There was nothing out of place, just the soft sound of the movie's background music and the occasional creak of the house settling. I felt stupid for even mentioning it, but the unease lingered. "Probably just the house, man. It's old. You know how it is," he said, his tone dismissive, but his eyes darted to the door, where shadows stretched across the floor. I agreed with him, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. The house creaked all the time, sure, but this felt different. There was a weight to the silence now, an unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. Then it happened. A sound, a faint tap from somewhere outside the room. The kind of sound that you might dismiss as the wind or a distant door closing, but it was too deliberate, too insistent to ignore. I turned to Jordan, expecting him to brush it off like before, but his face had changed. His lips were pressed into a thin line and his eyes were wide, his body unnaturally still. "You heard that, right?" I whispered. His response was a soft, almost imperceptible nod. He looked toward the door, his expression tense. Another sound, this time louder, a soft scrape, like something or someone was moving slowly along the floor in the hallway just outside. I felt my stomach churn. Jordan and I both stood at the same time, our eyes glued to the door. The basement was still, so still that the creaks and groans of the old house felt amplified. I remember hearing my breath quicken, and my pulse thudded in my ears. The feeling in the room had shifted. It was no longer a safe space. There was something on the other side of the door, something that didn't belong. "I'm going to check it out," Jordan said, but his voice wavered, and I knew he was as scared as I was. "No, wait," I whispered urgently. "We need to be quiet. We don't know what that is." But it was too late. Jordan had already crossed the room and was reaching for the door. I wanted to stop him, to pull him back, but my body was frozen. My eyes were fixed on the door, on the dark shadow creeping beneath it. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. No one was there. For a moment, everything felt normal again. The house was just as we'd left it. Jordan stepped out into the hallway, peering both ways like he was looking for something, anything. I followed him, feeling more exposed than I ever had before. The air in the hallway felt heavy, thick with tension. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and I could hear my breath in my ears. Everything seemed too still, too quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Then I saw it, a figure at the end of the hallway. Just a shadow at first, but as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw him clearly. A man. Dirty, ragged clothes, his face obscured by a hood. He was standing motionless, staring at us. His eyes, wide, bloodshot, and unblinking, locked onto mine, and my heart skipped a beat. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't move. The man didn't seem to be moving either, but the look on his face, it was like he was sizing us up, judging us. My stomach dropped as I realized we were in danger. "Who the hell are you?" Jordan shouted, his voice trembling with fear. The man didn't respond. He just stood there watching us. Then, without warning, he lunged forward. It happened so quickly I didn't have time to react. The man was on Jordan in an instant, grabbing him by the arm with a grip like iron. Jordan screamed, trying to pull away, but the man's strength was unnatural. I saw the flash of his teeth, a terrible twisted grin, and before I could even process it, he bit down hard on Jordan's arm. The sound of the bite was sickening, a wet crunch that sent a chill down my spine. "Jordan," I screamed, rushing forward. I reached for the man's arm, trying to pull him off, but his grip was like steel. In the chaos, Jordan finally managed to shove the man back, and he fell, scrambling to his feet. The man, now bleeding from the bite, looked up at us, his eyes still wild, still unblinking. But instead of continuing the attack, he stood up, backed away slowly, and then turned and fled into the shadows of the hallway. We stood there, gasping, frozen in place, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Jordan's arm was bleeding heavily, his face contorted in pain. I helped him back into the basement, locking the door behind us, but neither of us spoke. We didn't know who he was. We didn't know what he wanted, but we knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just a random stranger. The police arrived an hour later, but by then the man was long gone. There was no trace of him, no footprints in the snow, no fingerprints on the door, nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. In the days that followed, Jordan had to get stitches, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental scar. We were both shaken to the core. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying the encounter in my mind. Who was he? Why had he targeted us? And the worst part, the part that haunted me long after, was the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, we hadn't seen the last of him. It was another typical evening in Memphis. After a long day of seeing patients and checking vitals, I was looking forward to the quiet solitude of my apartment, the kind of peace I could only find in my own space. The evening was going as planned. I tossed my keys, phone, and wallet on the kitchen island, noting the faint scent of dinner in the air, then began unloading laundry in my walk-in closet. That was when I heard the front door creak open. "Jim?" I called out, my voice light, expecting him to be home from his evening meeting, as usual. I heard nothing, and for a moment, I just assumed I was mistaken. Maybe he'd come through the back, or maybe I'd misheard the sound. But then a deep, unsettling silence washed over the apartment. My stomach churned, and my heart skipped a beat. I stepped cautiously from the closet, every instinct screaming at me to be still, to listen. The soft echo of my footfalls in the living room was the only sound. And then, there he was, a man, standing at the kitchen island, facing me. No ski mask, no weapon, just a man, silent, staring at me. He hadn't even moved, his eyes locked on mine, expressionless, like he was trying to decide what to do next. My throat tightened, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It didn't make sense. Maybe he had the wrong apartment. Maybe he was looking for someone else. My mind raced to find an explanation. "Excuse me?" I said, forcing the words out. "Can I help you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached forward, slowly picking up my wallet, my phone, and my keys, touching my most personal things like it was nothing. My stomach lurched, and the dread blossomed in my chest. This wasn't an innocent mistake. This man was here for something else. I froze. A surge of adrenaline flooded my veins, but my feet wouldn't move. My instincts screamed at me to do something, anything, but I was paralyzed. The reality of the situation hit me like a brick wall. I was alone. I was completely at his mercy. "Leave," I finally managed to rasp, trying to sound more authoritative than I felt. But it didn't matter. He just continued, picking up my things as if nothing was wrong. The silence in the room was suffocating. My brain screamed at me to move, but I couldn't. I had to do something. I bolted for the computer, my hands shaking as I tried to bring up a contact. Number he was right behind me. I heard his slow, deliberate footsteps following me across the floor. Without thinking, I darted for the bathroom. I locked the door behind me, barely managing to suppress the urge to scream. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, and I clutched my phone, typing a message to Jim, my fingers fumbling in panic. "Call 911. I waited. Seconds passed like hours. Every sound outside that bathroom door felt like it could be him trying to break through. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. Then came the mumbling. Low, disjointed, words that didn't make sense but filled the air with an oppressive, malevolent energy. My skin crawled as I pressed myself into the corner, the lock on the door rattling as he tested it. My breath hitched when I heard his voice rising in agitation. My phone buzzed. Jim had texted back, "I'm calling 911. Stay hidden. Don't make a sound." I barely had time to process the words before the doorknob turned, and I held my breath, terrified that even the smallest noise would give me away. My body was on high alert, every muscle tense, but I was afraid to even blink. The next few moments felt like they stretched on forever. I could hear the man's muttering just outside the door, the sound of him pacing around, growing more erratic. His footsteps were slow but deliberate, and every creak of the floorboard under his weight made my heart jump into my throat. Then a terrifying thought struck me. What if he knew where I was? What if he was waiting for me to make a sound? A mistake. I nearly coughed. The urge to do so was overwhelming, but I clamped my hand over my mouth, praying it wouldn't be enough for him to hear. I steadied my breath, trying not to make a sound, my mind racing with every possible worst-case scenario. And then came the fight. Loud, violent, desperate. Jim must have arrived at that moment, but I couldn't hear the details. All I could hear was the muffled chaos outside, a blur of shouting and the sounds of struggle. The door burst open. It wasn't the man. It was Jim, breathless, wide-eyed, and shaking. I don't know how long we waited for the police to arrive, but it felt like an eternity. The man was taken away, and in the aftermath, I barely felt any sense of relief. My hands trembled as I processed what had happened, and even in the moments of quiet, I couldn't escape the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. Days and weeks passed, but the fear didn't go away. It haunted every room, every corner. I couldn't sleep without hearing that door open again, or the muffled, eerie mumbling that had cut through my fragile sense of security. I couldn't help but question myself. Why had I frozen? Why hadn't I acted? It wasn't until later, after months of reflecting on the experience, that I understood what had happened. I wasn't prepared. I hadn't anticipated such a threat, but I wouldn't let myself stay that way. I enrolled in martial arts training, learning to take back control, to reclaim my power. The transformation wasn't immediate, but each class gave me a new sense of strength. I was no longer the terrified woman locked in the bathroom. I was someone who could defend herself, someone who knew what to do when things went wrong. And though I will always carry the memory of that night with me, the uncertainty, the fear, the paralysis, I know that I'm no longer the same person. I've learned that survival isn't just about making it through the night. It's about learning how to stand up, how to fight back, and how to grow from the experience.